Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the stream. I'm going to be your host today. My name is Tyler, and I'll be taking over for Brandon for this stream and for some streams in the near future here. Don't worry, he's doing just fine, but being head of department for CGS, he's very busy, and so I thought I could step in here and help out a little bit. So thanks for tuning in, and hope you enjoy the stream here. So what are we doing this time? Well, it's going to be a pretty relaxing stream. I've got a character concept up here which I was working on in the last stream I did, which was a few weeks ago, and we made some good progress on it, but obviously there's still work to be done. And at this point we're sort of working on materials and lighting, so we've got the kind of base design figured out. And I'll walk you through that really quickly just so we can kind of look back at the process, and then we'll get back to this point here and continue working on it. So let's step through the process here. We'll take a step back in history. So this was sort of where we started. We did some little thumbnail sketches down here, playing around with some ideas on silhouettes, overall, big shapes, right? We want to be thinking about big shapes first, and then go into the smaller shapes, and then we went into our final drawing up here. And then the next step was starting to put in some colors and some values. So I'm a huge fan of working in a very organized way whenever possible, thinking about the way you structure your file in Photoshop and being logical about those layers. So one of the things that I notice a lot with students is that they have what I call layer chaos, which is where we start to have lots of layers going on and there's not a lot of logic to those layers. And certainly we should be organic and have fun with the process, but when that stuff starts to get out of control, then the piece can start to go sideways on us. So I'm a huge fan of trying to keep the files organized and think about, what is this layer doing for me? What is the purpose of this layer? And when I'm working on a piece like this, I'm structuring these layers in a way typically that relates to the different visual elements that make up an image, thinking about shadows and highlights, different kinds of shadows, right? We've got form shadows, cast shadows, ambient occlusion, and then materials dictate the type of highlights that we're going to have. So these are all things that I'm thinking about when I'm creating these layers. So in this second step here, you'll see that we started to figure out those shadows, and we're not working on local values too much. So if you guys are familiar with local values, that's like, if we have like a indigo shirt, right, it's very dark local value. We have a like sunflower, right, the bright yellow is a very light value. Those are the local values. The global values are the values that are sort of imparted upon it by the environment lighting, and that's primarily what I'm thinking about in this stage here. And then once I'm feeling pretty good about that, then I can start to figure out what are the local values and local colors going on. And I have kind of an ambient sense of this the whole time. I have an idea in my head of where I'm headed generally. So it's not like I'm, freewheeling it the whole time. I do have a sense of where I'm going, but I try to be methodical about it. So then we arrive at this step here, which is where we've started to bring in just a little bit of tuning to the atmosphere, and we're starting to collapse some layers down. Depends for me on how confident I'm feeling in how it's looking, whether I collapse or not. If I'm still kind of figuring stuff out, if I still want to kind of tweak and play around with it, I might leave those layers around for a bit. But this one I was feeling like it was coming along pretty good, so I collapsed them down. And now we're just going to start painting on top. And at this stage, I'm really thinking about materials. I'm trying to make sure the lighting looks good. And at some point here, we're going to start to get into some details, which is always really fun. So, all right, that was a long preamble, but I think we're ready now to just dive in. Actually, give me just a moment here. I'm gonna tune into the Twitch stream myself here. That way I can Make sure that I'm seeing comments and things you guys are talking about here. Okay, I got a few people watching. Let's see. Cool. All right, I got it loaded up. So if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to mention those in the Twitch chat there. And I want to say there's probably a way for me to see chat in the other formats we're streaming into, because obviously we're like multicasting this, but I don't have visibility on chat in the other platforms. Give me just a moment here and I'll see if I can. I'll ask our head of department real quick here. Okay, well, while I wait for that answer, let's get into this. Yeah, his face is looking pretty deteriorated here, so I think we're going to want to start to bring in some of that
prices that are lower than low on food that's fresher than fresh.
Rotted quality in the arms here too.
On the fresh you love with tools like the
I think this thing is pretty appropriate for the moment, right? It's spooky season, so we're all ready for the spookiness here with these creepy dead guys. I mean, for me, Halloween is a year-round thing. It's my favorite holiday.
Download the app today. Ralph's, fresh for everyone.
And maybe we'll take a big chunk out of his tricep here. And whenever you guys are painting something you're not familiar with, it's always good to have reference around. I'm kind of winging it here a little bit, so we'll see how that goes. But certainly, I encourage everybody to go find reference for this stuff. I worked on games in the past where we've got to do a lot of like kind of gruesome stuff, and I'm telling you, man, it's kind of crazy when you're looking at gross stuff all day. And you'll notice I'm zooming in and out a lot. It's just a good habit to get into. Just kind of evaluate things from a distance and from close up. Especially when you're working on details. You want to evaluate the readability of that stuff. Yes, I think if you guys want to ask me a question or something for this stream, if you want to just hop over to Twitch, that's going to be the best way to ask me a question or have a comment of some kind. And then for the next stream, I'll make sure that I have a visibility on the chat for the other platforms. So thank you guys for your understanding there. Hey, Marsupial. Yeah, this is just a random character I was coming up with for the stream here. Something fun to paint. And then this guy's going to have a bunch of kind of like glowing ethereal parts later in the image, but I usually wait till the end to do effects and fancy things like that. So the other thing you're going to notice here is I'm really careful about expanding my value range. I've kind of established the local values of the skin here, and I'm not going in and I'm not blasting white highlights on this stuff. I'm working down, and I'm leaving the highlights, if you can call them highlights, alone. Right, the top of the value spectrum is staying locked, because remember, the highlights are we're very perceptive to the material that a highlight indicates. So the moment I start trying to indicate those highlights on the surface, I'm going to be changing potentially how it feels. And the highlights, we just have to have a different mentality with highlights than we do with shadows. Shadows are sort of material agnostic, right? It's just the lighting or the absence of lighting. Whereas materials, they respond so differently, depending, you know, like with metal here and conductive surfaces, when the light hits metal, the metal absorbs the light, and when it reflects back out, we see a tinted color of highlight, because certain wavelengths are being absorbed by the metal and other ones aren't. So we only see certain wavelengths being emitted, and that's why metal has an actual tinted highlight versus something that's not conductive. You know, that material is not distorting those wavelengths, and so the color that we see reflected is the same color as whatever the light is. So if we have a white light hitting it, we see white highlights. Red light, we see red highlights. But conductive surfaces are unique in that way. And I guess just as a little bit of a teaser too, so after we finish this piece, like I said, I'm going to be doing several streams, a couple a week here for a while, until Brandon can free up his time again. And so I've been just planning, you know, what do I want to show you guys? And after we finish this guy up, I'm going to be working on a demo. So what will happen is I'm basically going to be live streaming me creating demo material, which I'll eventually release with the school as a video, which is just going to be kind of a tutorial on how to render something with very logical layers in Photoshop, thinking about sort of like, I don't want to say the science of materials and lighting, but, you know, thinking logically about what elements make up an image. Because it's just so important to understand that, you know, it's as artists, our job is to look at something and reinterpret it, right? And if we don't know how to dissect what we're looking at, you know, that makes our job a lot harder. So, you know, if we think about scientists and mathematicians and stuff like that, you know, before they work professionally, they're just very adept at understanding all the kind of parameters of what they're working with. And as artists, we have to do the same thing. So, yeah, after this, we're going to kind of get into the demo, and the subject matter is going to be still hopefully kind of cool, but it won't be as fancy as this. It's going to be kind of simplified, and our focus is going to be more just on like organizing ourselves and understanding those principles. But as I'm doing this character, I'm trying to just talk through it a little bit, so it's not a complete mystery. And so if anybody of you watching who are not part of the CGS community, all this stuff is covered in greater detail in our courses, so really encourage you guys to check that stuff out. We've got some super great curriculums and really awesome mentors. It's a really, really awesome student body as well. Yeah, I think what I want to do is let's scale this little guy up here a bit. Let's just give it a little bit more weight to the front end. It's pretty back heavy, and obviously we're playing around with just kind of a supernatural strength to this character, but I feel like we could benefit from a little bit of a balance tweak there. Hey, Sean247, thanks. Yeah, God of War, man. That's some really cool looking stuff. Super talented. You know, a couple of people over there. Just amazing stuff. Wraith Artist asks, hey, do I need experience to take the beginning concept art course? Well, it's good to have fundamentals under your belt in terms of just drawing, right? The course does have some fundamental drawing aspects as part of it, but the focus is really on concept art specifically. So if you have some of that fundamental knowledge going in, it's good, and you will likely get more out of the class. And part of what we're doing at CGS too is we're going to be kind of producing some material that'll be a little more open access, that is getting you through some of the more fundamental aspects of art, and then that will lead you right into the concept art courses. And then we have an intro and an advanced concept art course, which are also designed to kind of ramp into each other. So, you know, our goal is to kind of give you a full pathway through the process there. And so I'd say, yeah, it's good to have some basic drawing knowledge there going into the concept art course, but the students are generally pretty new. So, you know, don't feel like you have to be coming in there just like gangbusters, you know, able to like throw down really cool looking stuff right away. It's not anything like that. Probably triggering some people's tryptophobia right now with these little holes and stuff. I should know because I also have tryptophobia. If you don't know what that is, Google it. Hey, Marsupial, cool. Glad you got through the program there and that you enjoyed it. That's awesome to hear. Let's see. What does this character look like in the earlier stages? Was he always a spirit and warrior? Well, I imagine he was always some kind of warrior, but spirit, you know, I think he was probably a living dude at some point, and then he's been returned from the grave. Rise from your grave. You guys know that reference? I'm dating myself. That's Altered Beast. Okay, that's starting to look pretty messed up there, in a good way. Get some bits of flesh kind of hanging off the body too, right? Yeah, there we go. Does he have any special powers or abilities? Oh my goodness. I would imagine he's got maybe a bit of a magical quality. If he's like an undead dude, maybe he's got some extra strength to him. I think that's implied with the weapon and how he's holding it. And maybe he has some sort of magical resistance or something. The body here is going to be pretty spectral, so we don't have to worry too much about physicality of this area on the legs here. It's going to turn all into kind of like a mist form. but I'm going to try to imply a little bit of form at the very top here. Just so it's not like too truncated. So yeah, that's something I talk about in the class too, is concept of truncated designs. It gives you this like Mr. Potato Head effect where it feels like you've got these very kind of non-homogeneous parts that are all jammed into each other. There's no transition, which is kind of a hallmark difference between something that's supposed to look natural and evolved versus something that's kind of mythological. Like if we think about mythological beasts like chimeras and manticores and stuff like that, they have this kind of hallmark trait of being kind of like jammed together of various parts in a very truncated way, and they feel in that way they feel sort of like mythical and fantastical because it seems absurd, right? The way that they're joined together versus something that's evolved. There's an elegance to evolution where things kind of blend into each other, and so that's something you want to think about when you're doing your design. Is do you want it to have this kind of like a fairy tale like quality, you know, kind of like a typical mythic quality to it? Then maybe you want to lean into that more kind of Mr. Potato Head quality to the parts. If you want it to feel more kind of natural and evolved, then we want to think about those transitions and getting those to feel a little bit more organic.
With tools like the Ralph's app, where you can find personalized coupons on top of weekly sales, giving you prices that are lower than the everyday low. Ralph's, fresh for everyone.
Yeah, definitely some kind of ectoplasm could be cool in the image. I agree. Do I have any preferred brushes when I'm rendering pieces? Yeah, I do.
Fresh for everyone.
I keep it pretty simple. One of my favorite ones is just this palette knife brush. You can see it's got kind of a square or rectangular quality to it. Uniquely, it's hard on one side and soft on the other, depending on which way your stroke goes. So if I go from the bottom up, soft is on the left side, hard is on the right side, and if I go the other direction, that reverses. It's just a very efficient brush because you can get hard and soft with just one. Just gives you some interesting edges through the piece, and I just like it. I've added a little bit of texture to it, so we zoom in here. We can see there's a little bit of grime going on. It just keeps the piece from feeling too digital and artificial. That's definitely one of my favorite brushes. Like for example, if we did a sphere painted like counterclockwise, you can see that the inside's soft and the outside's hard. Whereas if we did it the other way around, feel more like a cloud, right, with the outside being soft. So that's kind of a cool brush. Other brushes that I like, this wedge brush is really cool too. Kind of feels like a marker in a way. Gives you some nice energy to your work, and yeah, I like that one a lot. That's the wedge brush there. But you know, when you're getting comfortable with Photoshop and stuff, it's good to keep it simple. You know, just keep simple round brushes, maybe a square brush or something. Don't get too lost in the fanciness of brush textures and things like that. Let's dive back into the face here. Turn off the glow. It's a little distracting. Also use the smudge brush a lot. Create softer forms. Am I looking forward to Ratchet and Clank, Crash Bandicoot, Little Nightmares 2? Oh, Little Nightmares 2. Definitely looking forward to that. That was a really, really beautiful and unique game. No, I didn't see that. Pull this thumb up a little bit here. always try to find interesting colors to add, you know, so it's not super flat. Think about the way a coloring book feels. Just kind of add a flat color. We don't want that. We want it to be painterly, and we want it to have interesting hue variations. At least that's the look I'm going for here. So creating some of these little warm hits in here will make the paleness and blueness of the skin really have a nice contrast.
Love getting prices that are lower than low on food that's fresher than fresh? Then shop at Ralph's. We give you more ways to save on the fresh you love with tools like the Ralph's app, where you can find personalized coupons on top of weekly sales, giving you prices that are lower than the everyday low. Ralph's, fresh for everyone.
Now it's even easier to save on your favorites with delivery and free pickup. Just visit ralphs.com or download the app today. Ralph's, fresh for everyone.
Yeah, sometimes less is more. You gotta remove details sometimes. I was just getting a little too busy back there. Okay, cool, Ian. I'm liking how that's going there. I mean, the interesting thing is, if we imagine this abstractly for a moment, we basically are looking at, where's my brush here? Yeah, this is basically a ball, right? This is a sphere, and our light is up here. So our highlights are kind of here, spreading out. Got shadow happening here. So you definitely want to keep that stuff in mind. You want to think about, how can I imagine this as a bigger volume, as a simpler volume, and that's the major shape that we need to make sure is obvious in the render. The arms are tubes, the body's a tube, right? Gotta think about all that stuff. Simplify. Yes, I am going to do something with the background. Nothing crazy. It's just going to be kind of studio lighting. We're really going to focus on the character itself for the scene. But we'll add some atmosphere. I'm going to add some smoke and mist and some, god rays and just some standard stuff, but nothing fancy. We're not going to put him in like a dungeon or anything. Excuse me. And then next question here is, any tips for rendering skin? And your skin often looks muddy. Gotcha. Yeah. Skin's tricky. Skin, obviously we have all varieties of skin tones. There's a lot of color complexity in skin. The way that the light reflects off the skin, lighter skin, we get this kind of a translucency. Darker skin, we have this kind of a reflectance. So there's some variation within that. And then the kind of, if the skin is like dry or oily, or even like wet, if it's somebody's come out of a pool of water, right? So it changes the look of the skin completely. So it's tricky. But as with everything, I recommend kind of simplifying and breaking it down. So make sure you have your lighting clearly defined. We really want to make sure we understand the direction of our light source. We want to think about our shadows first. Don't think about highlights, right? So just block in whatever the base color of the skin is, base value, and then create all the shadows and make sure that there's good readability of the form with just that in place. And then you can think about highlights on top, where you may want to change just how like oily or wet it seems. Like with this render here, we can see that we have a base tone of skin, and then we have shadows. There's really no concept of highlights per se, right? We haven't really gone in and made anything shiny. I'm going to save that to the very end. And with the skin, if I want to keep it feeling dry, I may not add very much at all, right? I may keep that really, really subtle, versus where the metal, right, we can really punch that up. So I think the key there is really just thinking about your lighting and thinking about the quality of the material. Okay, I'm gonna save the document here and take a little water break for 10 seconds while my hard drive wakes back up. What kind of games do I like? Man, it's all over the place. Really just looking for good experience, you know, good design, cool art style. Yeah, I don't necessarily have any like particular favorites. I'm kind of okay to try anything really if it's got good reviews. There's a lot of good indie developers these days. You know, tools are becoming a lot more accessible to people, and there's a lot of open source stuff out there. If you guys want to learn 3D, Blender is a great option. And then ZBrush has the so like the Core Mini, I think is what it's called, which is like a kind of a trimmed down version that's accessible to everybody. And you can get quite far with the package like that. And in fact, our updated curriculum for CGS walks you through a bit of the ZBrush Core Mini tools and a little bit of Blender so that you can incorporate a little bit of 3D into your concept work, which I do at times. But I think mostly that tends to happen early on in the process if I'm setting up like a perspective angle on a scene, or maybe thinking about some lighting or something like that. But it's still a pretty handy thing to know. Hey, Blasphemer, welcome. Yeah, yes, I am a different streamer than the usual streamer here on the channel, Brandon. But don't worry, Brandon won't be back eventually. He's just a little busy right now, so I'm stepping in here and just doing a bit of this character rendering. Do I collect comics or Pokemon cards? I used to a long time ago. Definitely, my dad and I would go on the weekends to the local comic shops, and he and I were big Spider-Man fans, so that would tend to be the comics we would collect most. We would collect other stuff too. We each had our sort of favorites, lesser, I don't want to say lesser known, but just less popular comic characters that we would collect. But yeah, definitely miss those days though. the memory of the old local comic shop. You know, that iconic smell walking into a comic shop, man. It's just unforgettable. Alright, I guess it's starting to look pretty pretty beat up, which is what I'm wanting. You have to resist the urge to do the cool fancy effects. Like, I'd love to just get in here and start, you know, doing the rim lighting and the bounce lights and the doing a little bit of bounce lighting, but you know, the rim lighting and like the glow and like any kind of like magic and all that stuff. It's the fun stuff, but I always save that till later. The cherry on top of the sundae.
Love getting prices that are lower than low on food that's fresher than fresh? Then shop at Ralph's. We give you more ways to save on the fresh you love with tools like the Ralph's app, where you can find personalized coupons on top of weekly sales, giving you prices that are lower than the everyday low. Ralph's, fresh for everyone.
Now it's even easier to save.
Oh, the smell when you open a Magic booster pack. Yes, that's another
Just visit
very familiar smell to
Download
me.
the app today.
Very nostalgic.
Fresh for everyone.
Yeah, Fatima, welcome. So I started this on the last stream I did, which was a few weeks back, and this was how we started. So I did a line art drawing here. We did some thumbnailing to figure out the design we wanted. We did kind of a final line pass, not a super clean line pass. I was leaving some stuff to be determined at the painting phase, which is not always how I work. Sometimes I'll be super clean and tight about the lines, just depends. But we kind of kept it a little loose there. And then the next phase here was where we blocked in basically shadows, transparent shadows on a base form there, and then we brought in local value underneath that stuff, and then I merged it down, and now we're kind of painting on top. So we got more of a kind of a raw process here, a one layer process now at this point, but you can see that we stepped through and we kind of established a lot of the basic stuff first before we started doing that. Yeah, no problem. Happy to do that. That's definitely the main point of these streams, is to share process and ideas. I mean, I think that's something that's a little unique about what this stream is trying to do, is that it's not just watching an artist create stuff, right? Which is the typical creative stream you'll see here, which is great. I mean, that has value in and of itself, but with the CGS channel specifically, it's a bit more instructional. So we do try to be super transparent about process and talk about that stuff. You guys notice too, I'm using the lab sliders here. This is my favorite way of adding a bit of color variation to a piece, because what we can do is we can select what we're working on. We can use these A and B sliders to nudge a little bit, and then we're creating hue variance that is based on what's currently there. We're kind of nudging in a safe way. We're injecting vibrance while still knowing that it's going to be homogeneous. And we can use warm and cool to help describe planar change too, right? If we have a form bending away from the light, we're going to have value changing. But if we also have hue changing, then that can even enhance the three-dimensionality of that. So it's a very useful tool. I guess we should start working on this axe head now, right? We kind of neglected it, so we should start taking a look at that. Thinking about putting some patterns on this thing. It's a really nice big surface to work with, so... Yeah, I love horror movies. Have I worked with any studios of interest? Yes, probably. Ones you've heard of. A lot. Actually, so if you go into the stream description there, it kind of lists some stuff that I've worked on in the past. And some studios that I've worked for. And currently at the moment, I'm actually working with Supergiant Games. I don't know if you guys have heard of them. They're I'm contracting with them and helping them with their new game Hades, which has been a really fun challenge. They have a really cool and specific art style, so I've been exploring that, and it's been really fun. If you guys haven't seen that game, though, I would highly recommend you check it out. It's really cool. Okay, so we're going to have a symmetry issue here. I need to be careful about this. Okay, there we go. Just introducing a little bit of sculpted relief to this design. But it's not going to be super dimensional. More of a surface detail. But that's something to keep it interesting, keep that area from feeling too plain. Okay, cool. Good to flip your image every so often, especially earlier on when you're figuring out proportion and balance and all that. But you want to do it every so often. You're painting too, just to make sure you're not missing something obvious. Refresh your eyes. There's some artists I know who flip all the time. They're flipping like every few seconds, which is a little excessive for me. I feel like if you flip too often, this is just me, but if you flip too often, I feel like it loses its effectiveness because then you become used to seeing it from both angles, and the kind of the purpose of it, I think, is to kind of disrupt your vision. I'm not too worried about the edges of the piece right now. You can see they're a little bit raggedy, but that's a super easy cleanup at the end. Never super worried about that. So here I'm just playing around with trying to get the metallic quality of the axe to pop the way I want. Music reminds you of Stranger Things. Yeah, it's definitely very kind of 80s inspired.
Let's pause for a pure, crisp smart water break. It's the vapor distilled, purely balanced pH smart water you love, fit for your go-to playlist when you're on the go. Visit drinksmartwater.com to learn more.
It's time to shine, California, literally. There's plenty of solar power right now and wind too, but from 4 to 9 p.m.
See, maybe I want to.
Energy is available. So remember, power down from 4
No.
to 9 p.m. Keep it going.
It's like as we add light and dark tones, we're sculpting essentially, right? As we add those, we're describing form. So you want to kind of think like a sculptor when you're doing this. All right, I like where that's headed. Like that's definitely starting to get something interesting going on. I'm liking some of the blues happening in there, and I likely want to bring in some yellows to enhance that a bit. And then we could, of course, bring in a few just random hits of color too. The interesting thing about color is, your eyes are evaluating the sort of warm and cool next to each other, right? So like in a piece that's all warm tones, you put a neutral gray in there, it's going to feel blue. So it's like perception is a huge part of color. It's not just about the sort of like literal colors. And I'm always thinking about that. And you also, your eyes will kind of observe things happening that give you a feeling. It might not be what's literally happening there, but it's going to give you a feeling like, this area right here, my eyes were just cueing in on this sort of a magenta in there. And that if we were to sample that, it's like, let's just sample that area right here. We could see that it's just barely red, right? It's just basically a warm gray. But it's giving this almost kind of a pink quality, and that's an intuition that you have to kind of pick up on when you see it, and you can kind of enhance that. You select it, you kind of nudge it in that direction and pull it out. That's how you can add vibrance. So you kind of have to just be looking for those cues, those little visual cues. As you're building up the warm and cool in the piece, you're going to start seeing those things come forth, and you got to be ready to kind of react and spring on them. And it's funny how much yellow we can add to this area and still have it feel like it's a gray metal compared to the gold above it. This idea that colors are sort of bouncing around the scene, I call it cross-pollination, which is, you know, that they're sort of sharing colors with each other. We think about light passing through stained glass, you know, it kind of takes on the color and passes through. Well, the light's kind of doing it in subtle ways everywhere in the scene, right? We have the light hitting this gold, and then when it's bouncing off, it's putting some yellow in areas nearby. Gives you an excuse to put any of the colors from the palette almost anywhere. I mean, we have to have a bit of logic to it, right? But it's kind of cool knowing that you can be a bit organic about it. And now that I'm feeling a little bit more certain about things, I can start to expand the value range a bit. Hey, Shreyash, thanks. Appreciate it. Does this character have a name? His name is Tim. That's a Monty Python reference, if anybody got that. So, you know, we want these wraps around this axe handle to feel really kind of dry and crusty, like a mummy bandage. So we got to be real careful. We don't want to add any highlights to this, right? If we start getting in here and adding these highlights to make things pop, then it's feels totally wrong. And this is a common mistake, is when an artist feels like they're struggling to define form, the first thing that they do is they start expanding the value range, right? They're like, oh, this is not reading, I need to make it brighter, or I need to make it darker, right? And that's why you end up with these pieces that have the values are all blown out, right? We have fragmented values, there's high contrast everywhere, and the materials are all shiny looking or whatever. We just got to be really careful about that. And in fact, there's some highlights on the axe head here that I feel like are going beyond what I want. I kind of liked it feeling a bit more stone-like. So I'm going to pull those back a bit. Yep. Cool. And whenever we have these lines that go around the form like this, they're what I'll call lines of topology, which is essentially that it's like describing the curvature of the surface, because you get this very distinctive band. And I want to be careful about when we have lines that flatten the form. And so, you know, in the case of this line I'm looking at right here, it's flattening the form, right? Because we have this sort of a cylindrical opening in the axe here. We've got these things feel like they're contouring, at least in a rounded way. So these I'm not as concerned about here, but this one's so straight, and we're kind of missing an opportunity there to help feel the form. So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to use the liquify tool here. I'm just going to bend it so that it feels like it's contouring better with the shape of the handle there. And I might actually do it here too while I'm at it. So let's hit OK on that. And we can see now that those feel like they're wrapping in perspective much better. So keep an eye on that, right? If you have a chance to describe the way the surface is contouring, then definitely take advantage of it. I think I want to get a little more detail in the shoulder pad here. It's a nice big shape there, and got plenty of room to work with. So let's find some patterns we can put in this. When we're inventing these, what feel like kind of arbitrary design elements, these patterns, it can seem difficult sometimes to know, like, you know, what's the correct way to approach a design like this. How do you know when it's right? You know, how do you know what to shoot for to make it feel good? And for a long time, this concept was very abstract to me, and then I started to learn about the rules of design and ratios, right? Shape hierarchy, this concept of creating areas of interest and areas where your eyes can kind of rest. So it's all about thinking about ratios in the end. And in the concept art course, there's definitely plenty of discussion about that stuff. But having some guidelines is way less intimidating than approaching a blank page without any of that stuff. So here I'm kind of creating a little bit of a hard edge there. This is that thinking like a sculptor thing again, right? Where we just a couple little hits, we can change the feeling of that surface completely. But I like introducing the hard edge there because we've got a lot of rounded things going on. I want there to be some interest, so having a few kind of more hard edges gives us that fun contrast. Wonder if this guy should have some like straggly strands of gross hair dangling out. Let's do this on a new layer. This is one of those sort of experiments, right? We gotta play around with it and not feel the anxiety of messing things up. So I just do a new layer. And I don't know, maybe it's just a light gray. Let's see if we can play around with this effectively. This might just be. I want to make sure we're not obscuring his eye.
Give to our communities to gain trust, but still filling us with poisons and calling it culture. Pick bills off our bones like vultures. I am not a prophet, but I can see.
Let's see if we can kind of play around with this and see how much we might want to mess with this. If this feels just maybe too distracting, oh, might be kind of cool.
Visit wearenotprofit.org to fight back.
There's something kind of cool about that. Getting this kind of like a crypt keeper thing going on. I guess he has like strands of white hair, right? I think he does. Does draw our eye right away to the face, which I think is good because there's a lot of loud stuff going on in this image, so we kind of need a little bit of help at the face area. The face tends to naturally be the way you look anyway, or the place you look first, so we don't need to do a whole lot there, but you know, having a little extra value help, I think, just gets the piece to pop a little bit. And then I'm just gonna kind of reduce the value of it kind of down here in the shadow area. A little bit back in that section. Yeah, that's fun. Let's leave that in there. Cool with that. Bring in a little more shadowing there on the back side. So when we're working on details, we can start to lose sight of the global light or the kind of macro lighting in the scene. So it's good to just step back and just see, is it feeling right? Are we getting those big gradients reading the way we want? Because as you're noodling on the medium and small shapes, sometimes that can start to cause the macro lighting to drift a little bit. You have to be constantly aware of it. Or at least when I'm working on stuff, that tends to happen a little bit. I'm sure there's artists out there who do not have that problem. And I am envious. You gotta be kind of aware of your own strengths and weaknesses, right? Like, I am not an expert at drawing and painting animals. I can do it when I'm looking at something pretty well, but doing it from my head is a nightmare, so I would not get on stream here and attempt to paint a herd of elephants or something without having plenty of reference nearby. And see, that was me responding to an intuition. My eyes were seeing that there was like a pink tone in there, even though there wasn't. It was me and my eyes evaluating comparisons, right? And so I kind of latched onto it and pushed it. The thing you can do sometimes, it's fun, is, let's do this. You can do, I don't know if I'm going to go with this, but just as an example here, you can bring in a sense of like a dramatic kind of shadow casting over the form. Like, let's say maybe it's on half the axe right here. So you have the sense that it's sort of like emerging from the shadows, which we could do that later. That might be interesting. We got to be careful because concept art wants to favor clarity over drama, and if it's obscuring too much of the information or it's making it hard to interpret by other people on the team, then they're going to get mad at you. They're going to be like, well, what the heck's going on back there? But I think we might be able to get away with a little bit of that. In fact, I think I might leave that shadow on the axe there, and could be that we bring that in a little bit on the character as well. But I think that's kind of an interesting way to help that axe form pop forward a bit. So yeah, I think we'll stick with that. So you can see from stage 2, we've whoops, let's turn on stage 2. So there's stage 2, stage 3. So you can see we're definitely making some good progress. And my guess is, we've got another half hour here, so my guess is that this is going to be probably one more stream where we work on this. But I'll make sure and do the whole process on the stream so you guys can kind of walk through it with me and see the entire development. So there'll be no mysteries, no jump cuts, right? All live. We'll do it live. I can't say the first part of that quote because it'll get me in trouble. got a little bit of a Casper tail here. It feels a little cute, but don't worry, it's gonna turn into like ethereal glow at some point, and it'll take on a bit of a spooky character later. It's just cleaning up a bit of the raggediness here is distracting me. Okay, let's give a little more love and attention to this end of the handle here. Yeah, I guess it does have a little bit of a Lord of the Rings quality going on. Should I take as a compliment? That's some really, really good stuff going on there. Awesome, yeah, glad you guys are liking it. Definitely feel like it's starting to come together here. A little bit of a design faux pas here. We've got looking at this shape here, and we kind of split it in half here with this big bulbous area. I'm not a huge fan of how that worked out. I don't know that I'm going to tweak it much, though. Let's see if we can liquefy this down a bit here. Give ourselves a little more room to this shape. Let's see if we like that or not. No, see, because this creates the volume of the head, so we want to make sure we keep that there. And so maybe what we do is we subdivide this other form more, so that way it feels smaller in comparison to that area. Yeah, there we go. Gotta always think in two directions as an artist, you know? Sometimes if you want to make something seem bright, you have to make everything else around it dark. So, consistently ask yourself that question. Hey, Zane. Good to see you, sir. One of my students just popped in the channel. Former students. How you doing? Hopefully making some cool arts. Now I'm starting to care about these edges a little more. This is a fun song. This has like a soft cell kind of feel to it. Wow. See how intense we want to go with this metal here. You got to consider the rim light we're going to be putting in later too. Typically, you don't want there to be light sources that are competing in their intensity. But yeah, I don't always follow that. I see that buckle doesn't want to get too highlighted because it's kind of tucked underneath there. We want to make sure it's receding in. You know, the body's kind of hunched over, and I don't want to have that come forward too much. So we'll keep these highlights to more of the outer sections. Okay, definitely I'm liking this section brought forward more. Just gotta be careful. It's easy to get carried away with this because it looks cool, right? You're like, ooh, shiny. But you gotta kind of control yourself, make sure it's not get too crazy. If I feel like I'm getting a little crazy, but I can dial it back a little bit here. Just dial it in.
Ooh, the McCafe pumpkin spice latte is back.
Pumpkin spice lattes.
Really that good? I mean, sure, pumpkin
Making me
flavored
thirsty.
anything is delicious, and that cinnamony smell does conjure up a certain time of year. And really, it works any time of day, like right now. Okay, I get it.
It's not hype if it's true. Get a quick treat whenever you need it with our McCafe lattes, mochas, and macchiatos. And now a small pumpkin spice latte is just $2 for a limited time. Only at McDonald's. Price of participation may vary.
Oh, Zane, that's awesome, man. Glad to hear you're doing the advanced course. That's going to be a lot of fun. And glad you're getting excited about the character too. It's coming together. It'll be fun to bring in some of the spooky glows and stuff later. We'll get to that. We'll definitely get to that. This, I guess I should have painted that in here. I'm going to ditch this layer because that's kind of redundant. This is that layer chaos that we want to be avoiding. Get rid of that. That was just an annotation. Save the document. If you guys are working on stuff out there right now, save often. Let's see. Yeah, I'd like to get a little more magenta in this axe head here. Let's see if we can find a couple opportunities to bring that in. Okay, cool. What if we brought it in here too. Oh, that's going to be really bright. Let's do that. Yeah, there we go. See, look at how interesting that looks now. We got some like greens, some blues and yellows, some reds. You got a whole like bowl of Lucky Charms going on in the belt there. Yeah, I'm definitely liking that complementary purple in there to go with the blue, or the yellow, I mean. Can't forget the end of the handle here. Let's kick up the corner here a little bit. And you'll see when I'm adding the highlight to this metal here, I'm grabbing the highlight I've got over on the axe because I've already established my value range over here. I don't want to start doing things that are disjointed and unique to each area. So kind of like borrow from what you've already got. Gives your piece unity and consistency. Alright, we're going to play around with a little bit of bluer color here for some of these veins. And we can play around with it being a little bit green too, just depending on how far we want to go. And the details we're getting into, I mean, you can see that this can be quite time consuming, and you have to consider, oh, how much time do I have for a particular project? You know, what, how do I get the most important details in first? So that way, if I don't have time to noodle on this stuff, I'm still getting what I need across to the rest of the team. So work from importance to less importance in terms of information, but can be hard to know sometimes when to stop on something. I get that question a lot in my classes, is when do I know when to stop? It's like, you don't always know. You just don't. Sometimes you have to just stop when you're exhausted, right? It's like, I've been looking at this piece too long, so I have to be done with it. Yep. Too much information there. Now let's mess around with the background a little bit here. Start to increase the drama of the scene. Let's get a little texture in here. This background's way too clean. And this is actually an area where having some textured brushes can help a little bit. Just got a couple of them here, like a charcoaly kind of brush. Not too worried about any rhyme or reason to it at the beginning here. I'm just laying some ideas down. We want to consider the light, though. We don't want to lose the sense of the light for sure. But you can see that with a little bit of atmosphere and considering the light, it starts to make the scene feel quite physical. Rowan Fan says, looks shape language, man. I don't know if I know what you're saying. Do I want to bring in... Maybe we should just start infusing the rim light in a legit way. Instead of having it living in this sort of a non-committal zone. I think we can start to actually bring it into the scene now. And then we'll save the glows for last. Alright, here we go. Merging it in. Rim lighting coming in. I'm going to redo this here because this was... the base shape changed a little bit on us, so it's got to contour correctly. Backgrounds can feel daunting for sure. I think if you get a chance to practice painting environments, that's it's a huge help, right? Because it's essentially kind of a little miniature environment going on. You just got to be aware of like how much this rim light feels like it's wrapping around the form based on the angle, right? We're going to have varying degrees of wrapping going on of this light. There's like some really interesting pink stuff happening there. I don't know how that... there's some stuff that's artifacts in here that I need to clean up, but it happens. Just gotta deal with it. And I might gray out the teeth a little bit more. Let's do that now. So we're gonna switch to color mode. I'm gonna sample the blue there, and I'm just gonna see what we've got. How gray is it? It's a little bit blue. You know what? Maybe we'll just go for a normal brush. Just go perfectly like a lighter gray with it. Maybe he's got a little hidden snaggle tooth there. Okay, those are popping a little bit better. Yeah, see, when I merged this layer in, I was not careful. Got a little bit of haloing here to these shapes, which is
At Westcom Credit
easy to clean up.
We believe that people working together can do great things. That's why for 85 years, we've been helping people throughout Southern California build better lives. With great loan and savings rates, free financial education, and more.
The way to have avoided this would have been to
Find out what Westcom can do for you.
set the rim light layer as a set the core layer as a clipping mask for the rim light layer before I merge them together, because then it would have made sure all of those forms were not beyond the edges of the base render. But it's not too bad. We've already got it pretty much cleaned up. Okay, cool. Let's keep going with this rim lighting here. Just noticing this shape here was getting a little too hard to read, a little too clever. Just pull that back. Cool, yeah, I think that's looking all right. So I was using a little bit of atmospheric perspective there, and the sense of like, kind of radiance off the rim light there to separate the helmet from the back shoulder. It's basically just clamping the contrast range of the element behind. All right, so we have the sense of midground and background. We've got some value puzzles to solve, though, still, with this shadowing on the back of this arm here. It needs to stand out from the background better, so I'm going to enhance the shadowing of that a bit. Just want to make sure it doesn't start to feel inappropriate for the lighting conditions, but I think we can get away with a little bit more shadowing there. Yeah. continue on. And now the question is, do I want to continue the rim light all the way up to the edge here? And I'm thinking I don't. I'm thinking we can suggest that maybe the light kind of ends. We don't get a sense of that. It really enhances this concept too of this being kind of back in shadow behind something, and pushes it further back in the image. And I think at some point we'll probably play around with a little bit of atmospheric perspective on that too. Probably just start to miss that out a little bit. But yeah, I'm going to wait till the end there to make that choice, because I still want everything to pop from the background a little bit. Getting a little thin for me there. Should we have him drooling a little bit? That seems appropriate, right? This guy looks like he might be drooling a little bit with the saliva. Thanks, Zane. That area is looking a little suspect there. Clean that area up a little bit. Getting sloppy. Yeah, okay, that works. Oops. Okay, now I think I'm going to try to enhance the shadow a bit between the arm and the axe handle, because that's just struggling a little in terms of readability. So let's enhance that just a bit. Nope, too much. See, we get carried away. And then we need to make sure that that agrees with this situation over here too. Okay. Yeah, it's a little fudged. It's not completely logical, but I'm doing it for the sake of readability. Just enhance the shadow and the rest of it a bit more to help it feel like it matches. Cool. So there I basically just painted a mask in that shadow area of the axe and then used it as a mask for the for a levels adjustment layer, and then I was able to tune that separately. Now I can get rid of it. Okay, so glowing stuff. Let's get rid of this because this is not well implemented. That was just a rush job that I did last stream to preview for you guys what I was going for. Oh no, it's actually 1 o'clock, guys. Shoot. Time just disappears when you're making art, right? But anyway, so that's where we ended up at, and I hope you guys enjoyed the stream here. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll be back with you most likely on Friday. So we'll do Mondays and Fridays here, I think is what we're planning on doing here until Brandon's return, which won't be too long, so you guys won't have to wait. But in the meantime, I'll try to keep you guys entertained and give you guys hopefully some useful information. But anyway, all right, have a great day, everyone, and remember to check out CGS. The channel here is always filled with great content, and of course our classes too are filled with more in-depth information than what we do here on the streams. All right, so I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.